I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. I was just going to say this is going to be the first in what we are planning to be a series of IG Lives. We're going to be doing them on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And I am so happy to get to do the first one with you. This is just, I'll give you a little brief introduction. Maybe you can tell us more about yourself. This is Sivan Hong. And the reason we are talking is because, the mission of Multicultural Children's Books Day is to promote diversity in children's literature, which is something that our guest today definitely does. And what is so amazing is she picks up on a type of diversity that is often overlooked. When we're talking about multiculturalism and diversity in children's books, a lot of times neurodiversity is missed. And so I'm so glad that you are putting a spotlight on this and really helping those children feel represented in literature. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and about the series, which I can show everybody? I actually have your books right here.
Oh,
This is the latest one, Emily D. and the Fearful First Day, which I just had the chance to review on my own blog, and it is wonderful, as are the other two books. But please go ahead.
so I'm Sivan Hong, and I've written a children's book series called the Super Fun Day book series, and it's about children with neurodiversity targeted to 3-year-olds to about 7-year-olds, and it highlights them in a very positive way as a way to normalize their experiences at school. And what's neat about it is your kids don't have to be neurodiverse to enjoy them, and they become a great conversation starter for all kinds of kids to talk about the differences that we see in the classroom.
Absolutely. I've read it with my kids, and I think it was a really good conversation starter for them. They have a cousin who's autistic, and so this is really a kind of a great way for them to think through, like, oh, what would that be like for someone starting school? And like you said, just kind of normalizes it, like, oh yeah, fidget toys. We like fidget toys, so they have that instantly that common connection. So what was your journey, and can you tell us a little bit more about that and deciding that this was going to be your mission to write this kind of a book?
Sure, absolutely. So I have 2 neurodiverse kids, and I am also neurodiverse. And when my kids were younger, I noticed that there weren't a lot of books out there that depicted children like this. So I had a son who needed to wear headphones because he had sensory issues in class, and I couldn't find a book to show him that other kids wear headphones in class. And he didn't want to wear them because he felt different. And even kids as young as kindergarten want to be as normal and as like everybody else as they can be. And it took a lot of convincing to get him to wear them. And so I realized over time that there was a gap, that we needed more books to mirror what these kids' experiences are like, to say, it's okay to wear headphones. It's okay to have fidget toys. It's okay to sit in the funny squishy seat or to have to chew gum. And it would be a way for kids to see themselves in the book and say, okay, that's me. That's okay. I'm not the only one.
Right. Absolutely. And maybe could we back up just a little bit? Well, first, for those that just joined, because I know we had some that just joined, again, this is Sivan Hong, who is a children's book author, and she includes neurodiverse kids as the main characters in her children's book. But some people may not be familiar with the term neurodiverse or neurodiversity. It's kind of a somewhat new term. Can you explain just briefly what exactly that means?
Sure. Neurodiversity is this concept that says all brains are wired differently. And there's a subset of brains that, so people who are autistic or who have ADHD or dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, bipolarity, there's a whole gamut of different diagnoses that fall under the idea of neurodiversity. But it normalizes it. It says this is just another kind of diversity. It's not bad or good. It comes with its challenges and its strengths, but it should be something that is embraced because, like all kinds of diversities, it makes our world better and stronger. I saw an analogy the other day where people said that, neurotypical people are like a PC and neurodiverse people are like a Mac. They run differently. They don't necessarily talk to each other in the very same ways, but they still are very effective ways of running a computer. And so that's the way I kind of like to look at it.
What a great metaphor, and so different than the language of disability. Like that there's normal and then there's something different or something that's wrong. And this is just like you said, like another kind of diversity. And your books, I think, go a long way towards helping normalize that for those kids themselves, but also other kids that they may be coming into contact with. You had mentioned to me when we spoke earlier that these are similar to a social story. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and then what this might have in it, or how this might help a neurodiverse child who's maybe starting school or going through something else that's new to them?
Absolutely. So in special ed, there's a concept of a social story. And a social story is a set of steps to help a child understand what's going to happen, something that could be scary. So social stories could be about the first day of school. They could be about going on a play date. They could be about recess. They're a specifically designed educational tool. And one of my sons has autism or is autistic, and I developed a bunch of social stories for him when he was younger to help get him through the day. And so I realized that I could turn these social stories into actual children's books. So all of my books have a series of steps in them that are based on the social story that talk about, here are my top 5 reasons why I don't want to do something. And in Emily and the Fearful First Day, that's why I don't want to go to school. But it really creates a structure so that...
I'm just going to show here so people see. This is her list of the reasons she doesn't want to go to school. That's number 5.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Creating a deliberate structure in the story mirrors what you would see in a social story. And so that way we could really be able to connect in the same way that a special education tool would connect with kids.
And one of the things I thought that was so neat about this is that you show that they're successful. Not just like, here are the steps you need to do, but here's a girl who's like you, and she didn't want to go to school, and here's what she did, and look, she had a good day. They figured it out. And it also, I feel like you're giving tools to parents and educators to, okay, if you have a child and they have a lot of anxiety about starting school, for example, here are things you can do. Go to the classroom early.
Because this story is based on her class on the first day of school before the rest of the students were there, and really walked around and did the very same things that Emily D did in this story. So Nicole Spivey, the most amazing kindergarten teacher, thank you.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was actually something I noticed when I read this. I thought, wow, that is so great that the teacher was so understanding and knew how important it was for this child and took the time to do those steps with her. So that is really cool that that is based on a real experience. Have you had really positive responses from educators and parents about this book?
Absolutely.
Or all of the books? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the greatest compliment I get is when special ed teachers are using this book in their classroom, or when parents tell me that their kid reads the book and points it out and says, this is me, this is what I go through. All the books are based on true stories, and so I feel like it's a way for my kids' experience to help enlighten other kids' experiences.
It's wonderful. And your children have been very supportive of all of this, right?
They are my editors, so I read to them all of my drafts a million times to make sure that they are accurate, relatable, and in their case, funny also. And they choose the names of the characters in the books. But like I said, the teacher names are real. Miss Austin is in my first book, and she is real. And Miss Molly is in my second book, and she is real. And it's my way of saying thank you to the incredible educators who are out there who make such a difference in the lives of our kids.
That is really wonderful to have those positive stories and get to shine a spotlight on them as well. And speaking of the main characters, there's something very special about the characters in the first two books, as you said, were based on your children. And in the latest book, though, you kind of took on the issue of diversity within the neurodiverse community, if I could say that. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but the kind of in the way that neurodiverse people are perceived. Could you talk about that a little more?
Absolutely. I think we have this stereotypical idea that a kid with ADHD or with autism is a white boy, right? Like that's how our media tends to depict it. And the data shows that that's not true, right? Like neurodiversity affects the population just like anything else, right? It is not targeted to one socioeconomic class or one racial group. And so I was very deliberate to make this most recent book a Black girl to show, you know what, this impacts all kinds of kids, right? It's not just the white boy, it's you know, the Asian, the Indian, the Black, all of our kids with all kinds of diversity also have neurodiversity. And it was my way of saying, look, like this is okay. And one of our great athletes, Simone Biles, talks about her neurodiversity. She talks about her ADHD. And so when I was writing this, I kept thinking about her and what she stands for in terms of influencing this character.
Right. And what an impact she has had on, like we talked about, normalizing having neurodiversity and how she has how she's dealt with it and with such dignity and really helped, I think, a lot of people raise their awareness and see how successful she could be, you know, even with all that she's gone, even with the challenges that she's faced. She's so amazing.
I love
But one more reason to love her, right? And let me see, there was something that I wanted to mention that I was just so impressed. I mean, one, that you saw this gap and you took it upon yourself to fill this gap. I mean, a lot of us see this and we might complain about it, but you actually said, okay, well, then I'm going to write these books and do them. But not only that, you took such care in choosing the characters, like you talked about, choosing a Black girl for the last book, but also just in the way the books are put together. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more, about the illustrations and the font, and why you chose to do them like you did.
So my books are very deliberately simple. The illustrations are simple because I want children with ADHD to follow along with the story. I have ADHD and I have a hard time following along with the story. If I see some picture that, you know, of a bedroom and there's a book on the bookcase and I'm starting to focus on what's that book on the bookcase and I lose sight of the rest of the story. And so I really only included the illustrations that needed to be there. And the font is very simple as well. And I used a font that was very deliberate about the way it made its characters so that kids with dyslexia would have an easier time following along. Also, I used, all of my books are on Audible, so they're all audio books, as a way of making them accessible for kids. Look, I see kids who will listen to books and follow along, which is a great reading tool, but also some kids are not able to access books in a typical hardcover way, but are able to access them with listening to them. And so I really wanted to make sure that that was an option for kids. With my ADHD, I cannot sit down and read a book from front to back. It never happens. I miss paragraphs, I miss words, I don't understand. But I'm a voracious reader because I go through at least a book a week, and I must support Audible because I consume audiobooks like crazy, and I really wanted to make sure that my books were accessible in the same way.
But I think that's so amazing because it just shows how representation matters, not just in the characters, but in terms of who is writing the books. I mean, of course, you have your experience because of your children, but just your own experiences. I have to say that that's something that would have never occurred to me about the illustrations or the font or, you know, the importance of the audio option for books. You know, it's not something that would have really, we would have been conscious of. And so you're able to bring all of that experience into it and make it so accessible for all children. I think that's really wonderful how you've done that. So can you tell us what's next in this series?
So the next one isn't school related. The next book is going to be about going to the dentist. And I kept toying with the idea of sticking with school but when I was at the dentist about a month ago, I was like, nope, this is the most awful experience for somebody with sensory issues. I'm going to write this story. And I have a social story about going to the dentist already. But if you can imagine, the dentist is loud. There's vibrations. You have to sit still. There's this glaring light on you. It's just about the most awful place for a neurodiverse person to be sitting. And so there are tools we can use to help our kids get through that experience so that it's not awful and that every 6 months they go and it's okay. So I just wanted to highlight those and share those with other parents.
I can just imagine because my daughter, she doesn't have, she hasn't been diagnosed with any sensory issues, but oh my gosh, it was horrible taking her, not so much the cleaning, but getting a filling done. And it was just so much. At first I thought she was in pain, physical pain from it. Just no, there's so much noise. There's so much happening, hands in her mouth. It was awful. So I'm looking forward to that book. And do you have any advice for either for parents of neurodiverse kids or for anybody that wants to, that sees a need and wants to start writing their own books? Because you've really just started fairly recently, right? In the past year or so that you've started publishing your books. Do you have any advice for people that want to kind of just follow the same path?
I think you just want to write, right? Like if you write from a place of authenticity, from experiences, whether your kids had them or you have them, just write, because there is such a dearth of books about this subject that we need as many authors out there sharing these stories, because the more books we get about neurodiversity, the more normalized it's going to be. I don't want it to be something that's different. I want kids to walk into a classroom and see a kid wearing headphones and it not even occur to them that there's anything unordinary about that, right? Like that's what we need. And this concept of children's books being a mirror and being a window is so important. And the more books we can get to do that, typos and stuff constantly, and I'll start getting distracted, and so I'll write something and I don't even finish a sentence. And then but eventually it gets done. I have my process and it works. And, I was diagnosed as an adult and I have made it this point in my life, finding tools that have worked for me. It made so much sense once I got diagnosed. It cleared up so many questions that I had. And part of me was like, oh, I wish I had known. It would have made things so much easier when I was younger. But now I have the tools that I need. And I think just whatever works for anybody. I think every writer has their own process. And every writer goes through those challenging moments. And I just know what causes mine. I can put a label on it.
Right. Well, that's such a big step to be able to do that. Yeah. And I think that's really neat story to share as far as you as a writer, because I'm sure other people might get discouraged, if they have to go through that process. But seeing someone else who's done it, half of all of us for writing these books. I'm just going to show them one more time. This is the latest. This is Emily D. and the Fearful First Day. But these are the first two, George J. and the Miserable Monday, and Benny J. and the Horrible Halloween. Sorry, I'm trying to read this backwards. But these are just such wonderful books. They've been great for my kids to use as windows, and so many children and educators to use as mirrors. And I just wanted to thank you for coming on and talk. I don't know, do you have any final remarks that you would like to make or something you would like to say?
I just appreciate everybody joining. This is my first Instagram live. I tend to be a huge introvert. These things make me super nervous, and all of your positive comments as I've been talking have been such a huge help and support. So thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's such a joy to get to talk to you. I've gotten to know you fairly recently, and when we met together ahead of time, and we just talked for, I don't know, probably like an hour just about, it was just so fascinating for me to learn about all of this background. And I've been so excited to do this IG Live with you. And we are going to be doing, for those that are just joining, we're going to be doing a series of these on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern next week, which I believe is September 1st, next Wednesday. Yeah, September 1st at 3 o'clock Eastern time. We are going to be talking with D.D. Cummings, who is another children's book author, and I'm very excited to talk about her. She's has a series of 5 books that she did through Kickstarter. So we're going to be talking through her next week, and stay tuned. We've got other things in the works. Thank you so much for doing this first one in the series with us. It was so great to talk to you and hear about it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, bye.